Welcome to Product Knowledge, the podcast about creating and marketing products that improve people's lives. I'm Andreas Schwabe, Director of Media Services at Graphos Product, and with me as always is the President and CEO of Graphos, Laurier Mandan. Most product marketers have heard the name Alan Klement. Even if you don't recognize his name, you're probably familiar with the ideas from his book, When Coffee and Kale Compete, Become Great at Making Products People Will Buy. Alan Klement is an entrepreneur, author, and speaker. For years, he's explored the root of why people make the buying choices they do. His conclusion: people buy things to improve their life. The process of using a product to turn an existing life situation into a desired situation is something Alan Klement calls a job to be done. This episode of Product Knowledge is part 2 of our conversation with Alan Klement. In part 1, we learned products have a job to be done in the mind of the consumer. Today in part 2, we do a deep dive into just what it means to rethink your product marketing from feature-driven to a solution-driven process that can keep up with the market. We spoke with Alan Klement from his home in New York City on the 4th of July. Here's part 2 of our conversation. Now, Laurier picks up the conversation where we left off last time, talking about how to identify any product's job to be done.
I think inventors very often they see the job to be done and they automatically, they perceive and conceive the solution to that. So they're experiencing the need for that job to be done, and they think in terms of the solution without really even realizing that's the job to be done that got them there. So if you have a really great invention that's a truck accessory or anything else that's achieving something specific, the mother of that invention is usually someone who wanted to do a job, and they saw the solution in terms of the invention that did not exist, where that gap was. And, but very often they have trouble going back to the initial point that they were at. They just begin to see the solution. And, and I think it's really important to bear in mind, where that came from. That came from a job to be done.
Yes. Yep. And that's where because again, you have to really take the investigation outside of the product. Like, for example, when we do jobs research, right, like the minivan example or the car example, I'm not going to ask them like, oh, you bought a minivan, tell me what you like about it, or tell me why you bought it. And, because if you ask those kinds of questions, you're making the product actually the center of conversation. So it's actually a product focused. But actually, when we do research about finding consumer jobs out there, there's very little talk about the product, right? It's basically the conversation starts off with, oh, you bought a minivan. Oh, that's interesting. And, maybe for 5 minutes you talk about, oh, tell me what you think about it. Just to kind of, they want to get it all out of them, right? And then after that, you're like, oh, okay, so you bought a minivan 2 days ago. Well, what did you used to use? Oh, I used to have a sedan. Oh, really? Tell me about your old sedan, So we're kind of actually exploring their life and how they interact with different products. And then kind of discovering that journey, the go from old me to new me, and then you kind of describe, what was, going back to what we said before, what were the process goals or the change goals you're trying to make? And when you were thinking about products, how did they or didn't they fit into helping you make that change?
Yeah, and usually with that new me, or future me, it's kind of that happier or more efficient future me that they're looking at. So they're looking at ways to improve their life by buying the product. And I find it interestingly, though, we talked about it being kind of iterative because it's progress oriented as opposed to being 100% solution oriented. They don't necessarily want to be just in a certain place. In the book, you talk about the importance of making progress over the importance of achieving that result. Now, why is that important to product marketers and inventors that they don't think just in terms of the end goal? Why is progress more important?
Oh, right. Because kind of going back to what we said before, thinking about the two different types of goals, right? You've got process goals and you've got these kind of outcome usage goals. And then very often when people are like, think about like that quote unquote end result, they're thinking about like this finite, moment. And so I think that's, there's that kind of thinking, right? But also is that what happens and is that once you achieve, we're going to go back to, so why progress, right? Is that even when I, achieve certain outcome goals or certain usage goals and achieve certain process goals, I could do things now that I couldn't do before. Very often consumers will want to start doing more after that. So it's like I've gone from level 1 to level 2. Well, now I want to go from level 2 to level 3. And so I think that's why thinking about, well, actually you're in the business of delivering progress. I guess maybe even like going back to our dongle example, right? You're always delivering progress to consumers and thinking about, okay, well, how can we always make sure that all their gear always works together? And so, and now honestly, that like never ends, right? As opposed to just focusing on, well, let's make sure that their monitor and their laptops can always talk, or, we can connect to the latest Apple laptop or whatever it is. So I think that kind of always thinking about progress, because again, once consumers, again, going back to even like the 3D printer, right? Once you got a taste of what the new version of the printer, oh my gosh, that's what I want, right? They didn't just settle there. They thought about, okay, what's the next version of the 3D printer going to be like?
And sometimes the job to be done is not necessarily for the end user, or in the first and foremost in the end user's mind, right? For example, I might create a product that the goal of that product is to change customer behaviors. I want to create a product that's more environmental, or maybe a product that eliminates meat. It may have results like that, where I want to change consumer behaviors. How does that work in the context of jobs to be done, when it's a job that the consumer may not really have in mind yet?
What we've learned is that there are like these like intrinsic goals that humans have, right? We want to, belonging and caring and, control of things and proficiency. Like there's all these kind of essential characteristics that make us human, and that we are motivated to change once there's some sort of disruption or, disturbance in that. So I kind of going back to your example about, let's just say, being environmentally friendly, and maybe we'll even use Tesla, like things. So it was like, and like being eco-friendly, for example, whatever it was 20 years ago, it was kind of like a fringe thing, for example, right? Electric cars, yeah, they were out there, but it was kind of like, oh, that's what the granola people use. It's, it's kind of whatever. But then it became like fashionable to people, right? So like so now you kind of like, those goals had been activated through, those consumer goals have been activated through the market. So, now there's celebrities talking about how important it is to save the planet and be environmentally friendly. And now, I'm seeing things out there that, governments are talking about it now. So then like that kind of creates a need in me of, well, actually,
yeah.
I want to be, I want to be belong to this. And now this is now important to me because, well, it must be important because everyone else is talking about it, but I should be environmentally conscious. So that's like the idea of like actually creating a job to be done.
Leadership, right? Someone is
Yes.
championing that job to be done, and creating a following of people who now have it on their radar. But the job has to be coming from somewhere in order for it to be perceived. So you need champions of change in order to do that. Or really slick marketing, I guess, that will create that desire in people's mind and say, oh yeah, maybe I should be eating less meat, even if I'm eating a lot of salt and other things that may not be good for me.
Right, exactly. Right, you'll be like using the old way, like the Beyond Burger, for example, or which is kind of I've been seeing now, and
it's hard not to.
That's great marketing around that. But anyone can see this happen. Just watch Steve Jobs. He was the master of that. He would, people, oh yeah, actually watch how we introduced the iPhone, right? It's great. It's perfect, right? That if you go back and watch it, I think for 15 minutes, he never talked about the iPhone. I mean, it's a product launch, and for the first 15 minutes, he never even mentioned it, but he doesn't show it. I mean, who does that?
And everybody knew they were there for that, right? So he kept you waiting in that case. And
yes, what he was doing was he was generating demand. He was creating, going back to before, he was creating that discrepancy in people. Oh, here's how you currently live and work. Let me tell you what's wrong with the way that you live and work today. And people are like, oh yeah, that is right. Oh yeah, I never thought about that way. That's right, that does suck. And then he's like, well, you know what? Here's how things should be. You should be like this. Here's how it should be. Look at this. Isn't this easy? And isn't this great? So he's kind of creating that discrepancy, and you generating demand, and you're seeing it happen right in front of you.
You're listening to Product Knowledge, the Graphos podcast about marketing products that improve people's lives.
Yeah, and kind of aggregating a whole pile of jobs to be done into one device, which is, that was the first time that any of us had ever seen it done with
Yes.
that many things at one time, even taking his own products and mashing them together and eliminating the need for an iPod.
Yes.
All these things happened. It was kind of this really transformative moment in marketing, I think.
Yeah. No, that's a huge, right? And people, maybe I need to emphasize this some more in the future, but people forget, like, there's some very interesting characteristics or things that happen around the iPhone. Like, first off, like when they introduced it, I think the year or two that Apple introduced the iPhone, I think the next year was actually BlackBerry's highest sales ever, right? So this idea that it was instant hit is not really true. And the other thing is that when Apple started making the iPhone, I think in 2004, when they first started, in the secret room thinking about it, the iPod had not even peaked in sales. So they were already anticipating destroying their best-selling, market-crushing product. They were already planning to make it obsolete. And again, I think that goes back to what I said before, being solution-focused, delivering progress, being agent of change, generating demand in consumers, as opposed to being reactive.
I wanted to ask you about what is the job to be done for a smartphone now? Is that job to have all the devices and software that you possibly can in your pocket and in your hand at one given time in a single device? What is the job to be done when there are so many of them?
Like, that's really hard to do. What you have to actually have to phrase the question, and that's actually a great way to think about jobs and how to research them. It's saying, well, wait a minute, since someone adopted the iPhone, what can they do now that they couldn't do before? That's describing it. And then the answer to that question is your job to be done. Like, for example, like me, like, I can now, because of the iPhone, so I'll speak myself personally, because of my iPhone now, I actually, when I travel abroad, I have much more confidence when traveling abroad, and I actually take more quote unquote risks. I go to more, I explore more, because I know that I always have this like pocket map, and then I can always get back to where I used to be, right? So like as a result of the iPhone, I change more. As another change I've made as a result of the iPhone is that actually I'm taking pictures more that I didn't do before, because it was always a pain in the butt. So now I'm collecting memories, of my family that, I always had this anxiety about, should I do it? Should I not? And I didn't want to hold around a camera with me. And so I just opted not to take a camera with me. And so now I kind of had this worry about losing, potential family album and family memories. But now I don't have that anxiety anymore. I'm doing it now. So, I can go down the list or like work on the go. Like, I always know that, like, if I'm working with my development team or whomever, that they can always reach me, and that I can actually kind of be a collaborator with them, even if I'm not right at my desk. Oh my gosh, we made this release of the version of the product. Can you review the specs? Can you review the design? And because the iPhone is actually like a mini computer, I can do that on the go. I don't have to imagine like 15 years ago, you get a call on your BlackBerry. Oh, hey, can you review all these documents? Something's wrong. Like, oh, wait, let me go to a computer, So like I can be much more responsive than even running my business. So I can go on and on, but that gives you an idea. Like, that's how you think of jobs thinking. That's how you describe it, is what can you do now that you couldn't do before? How have you changed as a result of adopting the product?
It's kind of there can be a number of jobs to be done. You might buy that product just because it takes the best photos in some case, and we talked about that on an earlier episode, that it's not the phone quality on an iPhone kind of sucks compared to some of the other things out there. But people don't buy this product called an iPhone to use as a phone most of the time. It is to do all these other jobs, and to me that's amazing. That I think that devices like that put us into a different era of jobs to be done, where we have to understand many different levels in some cases. The good thing, I think, for most product developers is that they can focus on greater simplicity and on achieving simpler purposes and getting their users to that desired future state through achieving core focuses and core functions rather of the product. And I think what most listeners have to think about with their products is focusing down on, a single job or just a few single jobs that need to be done. Is that correct?
Yeah. So when we're doing research, we kind of think of it as like research smells. I don't know if you guys have a software development background, but it's like coding smells, right? Like when you're reviewing a code base, there's like certain things or characteristics of the code base that make you think, I'm looking at spaghetti code here. We think the same way with regards to doing jobs research. Is like if someone comes back and says, hey, we've discovered 30 jobs that our product does. I'm like, whoa, okay. You're probably really just describing one or two jobs, but you're commingling, like the higher level job to be done with like all the other kind of maybe, like sub goals, or, maybe like you're commingling process goals with like outcome goals, or, like change goals with usage goals. Probably commingling all those together. That you really need to separate those out and say, well, the job to be done is about the change goals, and then the usage goals are something else.
Yeah. And from the buyer perspective, a big problem that's often made in marketing is not understanding which of those is the most important. And, nobody wants to read a long list of features and just understand whether or not this product is going to do the job that they need most to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I could, I can give a very simple example. Actually, I talk about this in the presentation I give, or will be broadcast in about a few months or a few weeks from now. But very briefly, it was a company. I could talk about it. It was a startup around bras, right? And at first, it was bras for models. And Emily, she's the founder. She called it Model Basics. She did some research and she found out, wait a minute, actually, the job to be done is not, she wasn't thinking job before. She recognized that actually the potential was around not models, wearing these particular kind of bras, but actually just normal women, like everyday women wearing these bras. But what they wanted to actually wear backless clothes. Okay? And they want to wear like lace wedding outfits, and they want to wear, backless or like halter top things. So what they wanted to do was wear types of clothes that they couldn't wear before because the current design of bras just didn't make it look good or wouldn't work. And so she actually pivoted the company. She changed from Model Basics to Backless Basics. She recognized that, at first, we're going to target models. But actually now it's actually every woman in the world, right?
Right from that product name too, right? Is Backless Basics. Right now you understand that core benefit and this is going to do that job for you.
Yep. So for her, and so right now in her kind of thinking, she's focusing on the job to be done as well. We want to make sure that actually it's always kind of expand our wardrobe that women can wear, right? And make sure that they're not being restricted by, certain underwear or undergarments, right? Again, going back to even kind of like the dongle example, we want to make sure that people's tech can all work together. And then they kind of think about, the usage goal, make sure it fits right, and, the slippage or whatever. So when she like markets and talks and advertises it, she leads with, wear clothes that you couldn't wear before, and then describes, here's how that happens, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that example because it goes from a very elite market that you're talking to that most women would say, well, I am not a model, to saying, I want that. I need that. Jobs to be done, I think, are driven by competition and innovation, as well as consumer needs that are evolving. All those things happening at the same time.
Absolutely.
So we're not in the same place most of the time next year as we are now, except for, in some realms we may be. If the product you create is a ceramic urn of some type, that people keep on using after your cremation urn or something like that, the job to be done isn't likely, it may never change, it may not change in your lifetime. But if you're doing an innovative product, the job might be entirely different this time next year.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. That's actually why so in my research business, we believe, actually, this is why I'm developing this analytics package right now. It's because I believe that marketing research has to fundamentally change. And I'm actually promoting this idea of, I call it like for lack of a better word. I mean, I have to coin it just right, but it's basically like agile for market research, right? We're still because of great manufacturing processes, like Lean and Six Sigma and whatever, we've gotten really great at like producing artifacts and things, but market research is still like, it's pretty much the same way it's been done since Bernays, like in the 30s. Like it's basically the same, right? Oh, we're gonna do market research once a year. It's gonna cost $150,000 and take 3 months. But I mean, even right, yeah, but even then, it's like, well, when you decided to start the project, and then when you finished it, actually things changed. The market, and I think that change is going to happen even faster and faster and faster, because you're not, markets are not a static system, right? It's not nature where you have like these static laws of nature. It's actually there's like that quote, like, you never step in the same river twice. Like the same thing, you never sample the same market twice.
You're working in a very dynamic world, and you have to realize that the results are changing day to day.
Yeah, because the system that you're studying is not a static system. It's actually an adaptive, dynamic system. So that's why I believe that you actually should be, create these kind of models of the market. Like we should model like how customers are making choices today, model competitive models, all these, need models. We'll just kind of make these models but then update them every month, for example. So we always know kind of, what are people buying? Why are they buying? How are their needs changing? So on and so forth. I'm sorry. That's a whole nother discussion unto its own, but I think that's very interesting. Right now, the working title is Jobs to be Done: Understand, Discover, Design, Create. And we're shooting for, I would say, end of this year, right? So I'm kind of thinking about, again, like I'm writing and thinking about the content I'm creating, but also recognizing, the kind of progress that readers want, and their own constraints, so I'm kind of thinking about is like basically 4 like very short like mini books that kind of come together. It's still very short because I understand people have like time constraints, but it's basically kind of 4 topics and you kind of figure out which combination fit you. So it's like 4 mini workbooks put together. So I think that's going to be really fun. Do you want to understand jobs? Do you want to discover them? Do you want to design a solution for them? Or do you want to think about creating jobs to be done? And it's, maybe 30 or 40 pages on each of those topics, and that's it.
That's all for part 2 of Product Knowledge and our interview with Alan Klement. To get a copy of his book free online, visit whencoffeeandkalecompete.com, and we'll have more information in the show notes. Graphos. You can catch us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter at Graphos Canada. You can also visit our blog at blog.graphos.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe, like, or review, or share the podcast with a friend or colleague. You can reach us at productknowledge@graphos.ca. Product Knowledge is the podcast about creating and marketing products that improve people's lives. I'm Andrea Schwabi.